Hey everybody, so what I have is an amazing tutorial using basically TypeScript, JavaScript, and AI with ChatGPT to provide a custom chatbot that basically can reference thousands of pages of documentation. It could be a book, a PDF, a CSV file, or something like that. And my particular scenario is I'm basically created an AI chatbot with that basically emulates Naval Ravikant and provides more custom answers. Now, obviously this is just a research project, but you can imagine you can use this responsibly in many different ways. And let's say you want to make a chatbot that provides customer support, and it can basically pull information from lots of different documentation or books and stuff like that, and provide a better answer than ChatGPT would be able to by itself. Right, so again, I'm using basically using JavaScript, TypeScript, using Pinecone to basically insert and embed the data, so then ChatGPT can basically use that later to basically provide more custom answers. And right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick demo, then we're going to go over the architecture, and then we're going to basically go through the code, and I'm just going to show you how I did it. So yeah, let's get into it. All right. So what we have here is a blank page, and then what I have to do first is enter my name, and then it's going to respond to me in a second. And again,
hello, Andrew. I'm Naval. How can I assist you today?
And again, I'm using Next.js with TypeScript, so you'll have all this code in just a couple of minutes. And then now I can basically interact with AI Naval, right? So let's do that. So can you tell me how to network briefly in 3 sentences? So what it's going to do is basically it's going to send a request to the backend. We're going to get some additional context from a book that was written with the help of Naval, and I'm going to explain how it all works in a second. So usually, because I'm using larger text snippets, it is taking about...
Networking is not as important as people make it out to be, especially if you're building something interesting. Focus on being a maker who creates something valuable, and the right people will eventually find you. It's also important to follow your intellectual curiosity and become the person who can deliver what society wants but doesn't yet know how to get. Spend time figuring out what you're good at and start helping others with it, giving away your work for free. Lastly, make sure to say no to everything and free up your time to solve the important problems.
Yeah, so basically what I've done here is not just use ChatGPT, which we have right here, but also basically Naval Ravikant has this book called the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is about a PDF of 150, 200 pages. You can download it for free. And what it does, what I'm doing on the back end is I'm providing additional context that's relevant to this question, and I'm sending that to OpenAI API, and then what it basically does is that it provides a more custom response. So this could be great for providing customer support chatbots, or maybe you want to have some sort of another personal development AI support that helps users with specific tasks, and you improve the experience for the end user. So let's go over some of the brief things that I'm using here. So again, the PDF or the book that I'm using to enhance this response is Almanac of Naval Ravikant. For your scenario, you could use a PDF, a book, a CSV. You'll see later you can actually use lots of different sources. And what else? For the sound, I was using 11labs.io, which I'm going to go over in a second, ChatGPT-4 as well. And what now I'm going to do is I'm going to go over basically the architecture of how this works. So I'm going to share this to, well, how do I share this? Or present. There you go. And let's move over my face. And then so basically what you have here is the front end you just saw, which is built with React.js and Next.js using TypeScript. Basically it's sending the query, the question that I just had, to our API layer. And there's basically three pieces of software that are basically services that I'm using. I'm using LangChain and Pinecone DB. I'm using OpenAI API. I'm using 11 Labs. So LangChain is basically a framework for helping us how to integrate all these different technologies together. And specifically, Pinecone DB is a vector database which basically stores information that is it's very easy to retrieve relevant information. So let's go back to our example here. I basically asked about networking. So on the back end, what we did here is that we sent a request to the back end, and we asked Pinecone to retrieve the 2 or 3 most relevant snippets relevant to the question of networking. So we basically retrieved those 2 or 3 code snippets. Then basically we have send that along to OpenAI API to provide a more custom answer. And then to top that off, we basically are using 11 Labs for the audio and the sound you just heard. And then so we're sending that response back, the audio and the text response. And that's basically what we have here. So that is a very brief overview of the architecture. You could also the database that is very easy to use is Pinecone, so it's pinecone.io. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go over the code snippets. And all right, so now I basically just opened up the repository, and what we're going to do is we're going to clone it, and then I'm going to show you how to get started. So the way you clone it is you go to click over the code, and then you copy over that. Then I basically have to open my terminal, and then I will run git clone, and then I'm going to cd into the library, and then I'm going to open it in Visual Studio Code. So basically what we have here is a bunch of different things. And also I try to document it as well as I could in the README, which you will also see here. You could just go over this very briefly, but you're gonna have to set up your environment variables, which is I would have to do with something like this. So I basically have .env.example here. So you can just copy, paste it here, and yeah, you're gonna create this .env file, and you're gonna fill it with your Open API key, 11 Labs API key, the voice ID, the Pinecone environment, and other information like that. Another thing that you're gonna need to do is just hopefully you have npm and Node.js installed. If you don't, please install that first. But once you have that, you can basically run npm install, and it's going to install all the dependencies for this library. Now, the 3 most important files here is when we have the scripts folder, which is basically what we need to do first is basically add the data to Pinecone database. So what we have here is we're basically initializing Pinecone, and then we are splitting our text code, which is basically this naval, basically the book of almanacs, or Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is already saved here. And yeah, let's go back to the script. Yeah, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the few different websites where you need to get the environment variables. What would you do is you would go to pinecone.io. You would already signed up, so I'm just logging in. And once you're here, what you're gonna do is you're gonna create an index. You're gonna pick dimensions 1536, and then for the metric, you could use. I think any of these 3 are actually fine. I've seen tutorials use all 3 of them, but in this particular case, you could use cosine. And then you would create this index. I basically already have one ready here. It's called Naval2. So here, the things that you need are the environment, which you're going to copy over here. You're going to copy over the API keys. I don't want to show you mine because I don't want to basically redo this. But you're going to get the API keys and the relevant information, and then you're going to plug it into these three things. So you need the Pinecone index, the Pinecone API key, the Pinecone environment. So once you do that, another thing you might need to do is we're gonna execute this script locally. So you need to make sure you have TypeScript node, a TS node installed globally, and also PDF parse. So I already have these installed, but if you don't, what you would do is you would npm install global TS node, and then you would also npm install PDF parse because yeah. And then once you do that, what you would be able to do is you would run the script, basically executing this the script over here. And what that would do is I'll just read over the basically these lines for you. So first we're doing is we are initializing our Pinecone client. We're using LangChain for loading the PDF, and then we are splitting it in chunk size of 2000. These are characters, so 2000 characters. So basically imagine you have a book of 150 pages. Every 2000 characters, it splits that. And then there's also a chunk overlap of 200. So once we split that PDF of 150 pages into, I think this one will be maybe about 200 split documents, then we basically reload that into Pinecone. And that's basically, that's what this script does. Now, a lot of other tutorials use this with Python, but if you want to do something that's slightly different, you could also just always go to LangChain documentation. So this is the Python version, which you have here, if you're familiar with Python. However, I was just using basically LangChain, and we have lots of different things you can do here. The way you can index, the way you can create schemas and models, and all this other stuff. So they basically provide text snippets for us to use, and examples and things like that. So honestly, I was just using a lot of this, and it's been really helpful. So again, if you're not using a PDF, if you're using a CSV or another kind of file, you basically just look at the documentation for these loaders, and then you basically use it for the use cases that you have. So we just went over step one, which is a script aspect. Now we're going to go over to the index.tsx folder, which is basically our front end that is dealing with rendering the application. So, well, how did this work? Well, basically what we're doing is I'm using the framework called next.js, and what it's doing is that it's basically abstracting a lot of things for us. Now, there are tons of tutorials on how to use Next.js with React, so I don't think it makes sense for me to just go over that. You could just look at a few other tutorials. So what I'm going to do is explain the code that is relevant here. So first, I'm importing a bunch of the stuff, obviously. Then what I'm going to do is go over the HTML part, right? So this first section over here, now this is the part which basically asks my name. So I'm going to do that, and this is basically this section, right? So if I enter my name here, Andre, it's going to respond in like a few seconds.
Hello, Andre. My name is Naval. How can I assist you today?
It doesn't know how to pronounce Naval. I guess it doesn't have that context, but aside from that, I think it works pretty well. So that's basically the first section, and then the second section is the one that maps over the messages in the array, which is basically the whole, like this second part over here. So that is like a very basic understanding of what this HTML part is doing. Now there's a few small parts that are about tracking different states. I think the only part that is worth delving into depth with, is basically how like when I message the AI Naval, I just want to explain to you like the request and response part of this. So basically, when I send a message, what I'm doing is I'm executing this method called ask AI. And what it has a few checks here, just making sure that the username is already provided and other things like that. Then what we're doing is we're sending this request to our API, and now I can basically start to probably go over the API part of you. Now I already have the .env folder here. Now I don't want to show you my secrets, but basically you would just have them filled out like this. Now at this point you can fill out the you want to fill out the OpenAI API key, the 11 Labs key, and things like that. So I'm going to briefly go over on where to find that. So you would basically go to 11labs.io, and I'm already logged in. And then you would get the API key, and then you'd also get the voice ID as well. It's pretty easy to do that. And then for OpenAI.com, you basically go to the website, you log in, and then you go to the API key section, and then you can create a new secret key here. I already have 2 created, so I don't want to create any more. And then once you have those, you go back here and you fill that in your .env folder. Now, now that you have that, you should be able to run the application. Now, remember that the front end is sending requests to our backend, which is right over here. And this is an interesting part of the application, because what we're doing is we are interacting with OpenAI, with Pinecone, and with 11 Labs as well. So we could just read this line by line. At first, I'm executing this method called ask OpenAI. And what it's doing here is we're doing a similarity search with Pinecone. And really basically what I did is I created this utility method called Pinecone store. And it's basically using LangChain, vector store, and embeddings to retrieve the most relevant information from the book that we just talked about, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, right? So once this is the code that is retrieving that information from Pinecone, which is, where is it? It's right over here. So this is the part that is doing the similarity search. Now, once we get that, we are providing additional context to OpenAI. So I'm basically providing the top 3 relevant responses from Pinecone, which I added over here. Now, once I do that, then I basically send the message to the OpenAI chatbot. And then I just collect the response. And that is basically what this function is doing. The next and the last step in the API is basically generate the audio version of the response. So we have the text version of the response here, but now we just also we just want the AI to talk to us in a human voice. So I'm using 11 Labs to basically do text to speech, and this is the code that does that. Now, once we do some more transformations here into an array buffer and things like that, and then once that's ready, we basically send the audio version and the translated text. And these are basically the 3 most important files we have. Again, just the script. This is for creating the Pinecone index. I have the code here. You can play around with this yourself, and you can make the chunk size different. Then we have the basically the front end of the application, which is about 200 lines of HTML and React code. You can do whatever you want with this and make this as pretty or as basic as you want. As you can see, mine here is quite basic, and I can just basically continue to have a conversation. Thanks, Naval. And it might just provide a very basic response. Who knows? We're going to find out right now. And then obviously we have the API layer, which is a lot of the meat of the application is in, where we're dealing with executing the Pinecone database.
You're welcome, Andre. If you're looking for further insights or resources, I suggest checking out my Twitter account at Naval, my podcast Naval, or my website NavDal. Additionally, a compilation of my thoughts on wealth creation can be found in the podcast series How to Get Rich. There's also a book called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant that contains excerpted interviews with me and an accompanying website, navalmanac.com, that features illustrations of my ideas by Jack Butcher.
Yeah, so as you can see here, the application is continuing to work. And yes, so with that, I think that covers everything. If you have any questions about the code here, feel free to leave a comment on YouTube. So that covers the tutorial. Thank you for watching. I'm going to be covering more emergent tech content. So like and subscribe. So thank you for watching. Have a good day. See ya.